That sounds pretty ridiculous. What goes through your mind when you're on your knees having heart palpitations at high altitude? Do you feel like, are you aware at that moment that you might die, or is it just kind of euphoric because of the low oxygen?
No, you're aware. You're for sure aware of the consequences. Yeah, it was really really scary. And at that in that moment, I did have to turn around and go back lower to where I was feeling okay again, and and start to recover. So it's I've never been in a situation where like what you hear about some people that end up just sitting down in the snow, delirious, taking their clothes off, and like thinking that they'll just take a quick rest and then never wake up. I've never been in that level of delirium at high altitude. I've always been very aware and very conscious. It's more when you get into, and I haven't been there, but get into what is not known as the death zone, which is above 26,000 feet, where you get into the upper echelon of Himalayan climbing. When you pass that kind of marker of altitude is where just your body is shutting down every second you're up there. And that's where that becomes more of a risk versus being above 20 into that 23 range. Um, the the bigger things that you need to watch out for is you can still obviously get high altitude pulmonary or cerebral edema at that altitude if you haven't acclimatized well. Um, I now, with me, because of that moment on Aconcagua, I now carry a little pulse oximeter everywhere I go. Um, not everywhere I go, but everywhere I go in the mountains, I have this little thing, and I put this on, and we'll check like my blood O2
Oh,
saturation,
cool.
and that's how I'm able to kind of like acclimatize in the moment. Is just knowing, okay, am I below 80%, and if I am, then I'll stop and take. I don't know if you know the Wim Hof breathing method, but like I'll just like really suck in as much air as I can with those like and just fill the lungs, and I'll like notice the difference of that giving me a boost of a couple extra percent, and being able to kind of keep pushing forward.
Yeah. Could you talk about your movie Between the Peaks? How did that come about?
Between the Peaks, the origin story there is that it was kind of a snowball of a lot of things in my life. I had been building a video production business with my brother through high school and college. And, he started it, but I was helping grow the thing as a production manager and doing everything, all the ins and outs of media and, photo and marketing and video and editing and all that. Right. So I had this like media kind of background. I was at school at the time studying marketing. That was my major in business school, and I had studied abroad in New Zealand. I had always been drawn to the outdoors and to adventure. And really, when I was there for that extended period of time as a junior, I was it was just my entry point into all things like the world of adrenaline sports and extreme outdoors that I could actually
Good
throw
place for
myself
it.
into. Yeah, totally. Because I did not grow up with parents that were into the extreme side of things, and so New Zealand was my like eye-opening experience for all of that. And so I came back, and that next year I was a senior, thinking about what's next after school. My brother and I were transitioning out of the video company at that point because it was a amateur sporting thing where we would film like cheer and dance and figure skating competitions, and all of a sudden these were getting very popular, and
Yeah.
people were just filming from the stands and not buying the videos as much. We saw the writing on the wall. So transitioning out of that, I was just thinking like, what's next for me? What do I do with this background in media and entrepreneurship and this passion for adventure and everything that I had been learning about marketing and advertising, and Between the Peaks was kind of the answer for me. It was also at the same time I had watched the movie 180 Degrees South, which is a story of Yvonne Chouinard and Jeff Johnson and Doug Tompkins. And Jeff was a Patagonia photographer who goes to try to retrace the steps of Doug and Yvonne climbing Corcovado down in Patagonia. And it's an incredible movie, and it inspired the heck out of me at that
Is that
time.
Touching the Void? Is that
No,
that
no, it's
story?
it's it's called 180 Degrees South.
I mean, was that story the one that was turned into Touching the Void, where the guy fell down a crevasse and had to like crawl his way with a broken leg for like a day?
No, no, no. Joe Simpson, I think, is the one that
Oh,
wrote
okay.
that, right? Yeah, different story.
Okay.
Also amazing, inspiring. So I had watched this film, and then also, I don't know if you remember, there was a show called The Buried Life on MTV at the time, where these like four Canadian friends decided to just buy a bus and travel around the States and Canada, crossing things off of their bucket list, and yet at the same time helping some random person they met do something on their bucket list.
Wow.
And they came and spoke at my school at Bryant University. And all these things were just happening at the same time. And I was studying, my minor was environmental science, and it was just all gelling that like, wow, this is amazing. This is like, here's this ode to adventure and open road in this one film that spoke to me. Here's this story of these young guys that had a dream to like do more in their life than anybody thought possible, as well as help others do more. And I've always been drawn to that kind of volunteering, philanthropic component. And I just looked at that like snowball of my background of experiences. And Between the Peaks was the idea that came out of that. It was just like, well, what if I went down and climbed the tallest mountain in South America and then traveled north up the Pan American, kind of like the reverse of the 180 degrees south story where they went from Santa Cruz, California down to Patagonia. I was going north up the Pan American, um, stopping for a week in every country along the way to volunteer for a different cause, and then finalize the journey up in Alaska on Denali, climbing the tallest mountain in North America. So it was Between the Peaks because yes, I had this like dream of climbing these tall mountains and of having this grand adventure, but I knew that the story, not only the story that I cared most about living, but the story that I knew was most marketable, that I would potentially be able to make a film about and get sponsors around, was what happened in the journey along the way, and the causes and the impact and the things that we were able to shine light on, like make a difference, but pursue your dreams at the same time, right? It's like that was the whole thing, is like do check it off for you but also help others. So that was the Between the Peaks concept. And with that in mind, I called up two friends and got them to quit their jobs and join.
That's a beautiful story. What was one of the challenges that came up? Like, what surprised you in making that documentary?
um, I mean, we spent a year and a half, a little over that, planning and training, and putting all the logistics together and figuring out which causes and organizations we'd be working with in each country, and and for the amount of planning and preparation that went into it, what surprised me most was like it was like we got there and had planned nothing.
Mm, yeah,
That's how it felt.
yeah,
It was just along the way. It was like everything that made the story worthwhile was the stuff that was not in the planning docs.
right.
And it was funny. We'd show up at these organizations and they'd be like, "Wow, we had no idea when you told us you'd come on this date a year and a half ago that you'd actually show up." And so like it was a surprise every time we like went into one of these countries and worked with these people in these places, whether it was like a environmental humanitarian thing or working on coffee plantations and permaculture stuff and learning all the ins and outs of all that. The big surprises were the unknowns along the road, right? And the times that we like almost got, or that I did get robbed a couple times and almost got jumped and mugged at the border of Nicaragua and Honduras, if not for like a group of like 12-year-olds on their bicycles that got in the way and helped us find a little hostel to get out of harm's way. The time that we couldn't get, like we bought a truck in Chile thinking that we'd drive this thing the entire stretch, and after a month with the truck going back and forth from Argentina to Chile after our climb, we get like way north up the Atacama Desert trying to get into Peru, and then we just have the wrong documentation and they won't let us in. And so we were stuck for 14 days living out of our high altitude mountaineering tent on a 100-degree border town beach in Chile, trying to sell this truck on the streets.
Wow.
And that little stretch of time on the beach was like some of the most memorable and impactful of the entire trip.
Yeah,
So that's what stands out, is like the adventure is in the unplanned moments.
for
And
sure.
so that's where like after that, um, a lot of my mission for like the adventure travel stuff that came next in my career was that I wouldn't plan things. I would just pick a place to go and have an idea of an adventure, but I wouldn't put an itinerary together because I was craving the unknown and how much you learn about yourself through that.
That resonates. Before we move on from Between the Peaks, how would you describe the personality of each mountain? Aconcagua in South America and Denali in North America.
Um, the personality.
Like, what comes to mind when you think of the mountain?
Yeah, Aconcagua was more of a community mountain. Plaza de Mulas, the base camp there, was so much fun hanging out with all the different porters and people in different groups, and jamming on like bongos and guitars every night. And we didn't go with guides or porters or anything like that. It was just the three of us, but we like were able to just immerse in the community down there at Plaza de Mulas, and and learned about like mate tea, and just passing around all the little mate cups with the bombisas and that whole ceremony. And so it was really just a warm, rich cultural experience as much as anything mountaineering. The harsh side of it was how dry that mountain is, and also the variety of climate. It's like you're going from Puente del Inca, where you start your climb, where it's 85 degrees, and you're trekking through the Horcones Valley, and it is just arid, and the sun is beating on you. And at the same time, you know that you're going up like to where it's going to be feeling
To
Arctic,
space.
right? And so that was a real challenge of that mountain, as well as just finding clean water or needing to boil water. That was also challenging, because you spend so much time in the dirt, right? Like that's a big difference. Whereas Denali is just an absolute beast, and most of the time you feel like you are on another planet. You just said space. Denali feels like space, whereas Aconcagua, it felt like you run into more people more frequently, and it felt just like a long big hike with friends. Versus Denali felt like this is another planet, and the stakes are higher than they've ever been, and I'm more remote than I've ever been. And it is literally just like you get flown onto that glacier, and then when that plane flies away, like it is just your own gear and knowledge and experience and survival skills that have to keep you alive. You won't touch foot on dirt for 3 weeks. It's just the glacier, and it is the only place that I've ever been where every single week, or not week, every day around us there was disaster striking, whether it was avalanches or people in other climbing parties like hearing about them falling through crevasses, or somebody dying above the fixed lines from high altitude cerebral edema. And that just was like the norm daily on like what was happening around us. So it was definitely a gnarlier environment. Plus, it's like close to the Arctic Circle, so that 20,000 feet, like the higher you get to that, it feels more like a Himalayan mountain in terms of like the atmosphere.
As I was doing my research, perhaps not quite as extensive as you, I learned that Denali is training. People go there to train for climbing some of the big Himalayan mountains before they leave North America. Uh, so yeah, it definitely seems in some cases even more dangerous than some of the Himalayan mountains. So that's, I mean, it's impressive, but also what, like, where does your resilience come from when you're facing all of this uncertainty, this chaos, and literal death? What what drives you? Like, what's your focus on?
I guess the thing that I never think about failure as an option. That's my resiliency, is like whether it is with a creative project or business, or on a mountain or anything else. Like I have just never accepted that I won't succeed. And so like not letting that creep into my brain has always been what drove me to not think about like the stakes of the whiteout that we're in, and get really scared about the consequences of making the wrong turn, but just knowing that I won't. And I know that makes no sense, because of course you can. Of course, like you can take a wrong step, you can miss your marker, you can the battery on your navigation can die, and then you can get lost, and like those things can happen, of course. But I have just never accepted them as an option, I guess. And so for me, the resiliency comes from a place of just not allowing myself to have another option. And I guess I also think about this like in snowboarding. When there have been plenty of times where I have been on a line in the backcountry, or even on inbounds like double blacks that are just pretty crazy and steep and cliffed out, where it's just a no fall zone. And I don't know if you ski or snowboard yourself, do you?
No, I don't.
Okay, so but like anybody who does, I guess, would resonate with this, the fact that like there are just some lines that I can't fall. And I think that that's the no fall zone attitude has perpetuated from my life of learning to ski at fourth grade and learning to snowboard in eighth grade, and then taking that to the limits and the extremes through college and beyond. I got comfortable with no fall zones and just not allowing myself to think that there is another option other than do it right and get down. And so that's kind of where the resiliency comes from.
Have you seen the movie Interstellar?
Yeah.
There's a line by Matthew McConaughey when they're trying to approach this blown up base that they need to get home, and uh, like they're saying, like, it's impossible, and Matthew McConaughey says it's necessary.
Yeah,
And that what you said reminds me of that.
absolutely. Yeah.
I like that.
Impossible is not an option.
Right, right. Yeah, good mindset for a leader, especially. So you've basically came online like 2.0 Jonathan Ronzio in New Zealand, seeing all this adventure around you. What are some of your like favorite adventures? Like what are some of your favorite adrenaline sports?
I mean, favorite adrenaline sports have always been snowboarding, mountaineering, rock climbing, ice climbing. I haven't done a ton of, but when I do it, it's really exhilarating, super fun. Um, snowboard mountaineering is really the mecca for me. That's like when you can climb something big in the backcountry and then snowboard down it rather than walk down. Like that's my favorite thing. Of course, when I was younger, I had dreams of getting into like base jumping and wingsuit flying and stuff.
Yeah,
I still see the videos and I'm like, that looks like the most fun thing in the world. But I
right.
don't have a strong desire to pursue that now with a 2-year-old son. I'm starting to see
Yeah.
consequences a little bit differently. Um, but yeah, snowboard mountaineering is for sure my thing. And as far as favorite adventures, I'll call out even in like the last couple years, something I never thought that I would actually really get into was running. But by nature of the pandemic, I was just all of a sudden couldn't travel and couldn't go to the big mountains because I live just south of Boston. And so there's a nice trail reservation across the street from me, and I started getting into trail running in a big way, and then trail marathons, and then ultra marathons, and so now I'm just addicted to like the endurance side of that as well. And so like last year, my brother and I actually went down and we did the Antarctica Marathon, and that was unbelievable. Antarctica is unlike anything I've ever seen in my life. Um, and the other one that actually, so that was like we were at like 66 degrees south. And then a month later, I went to 66 degrees north with my two friends from the Between the Peaks trip for our like 10-year anniversary of celebration adventure from that original trip. We went up to climb Kaldbakor, which is the tallest mountain in Iceland, and to ride off of that. And so that like in just recent history, those two for sure stand out in my mind. Um, but there've been a lot, for sure, been a lot. And as much as I love the extremes of the adventures, I also really love just exploring culture, right? And so, like going to Thailand for 3 weeks with my wife and volunteering at the Elephant Nature Park, and then going, through Chiang Mai, and then going down to Krabi and rock climbing in Railay. Like it doesn't always have to be pushing the limits of extremes for me. I like the balance of just like seeing unique places in the world and finding ways to make the world my playground along the way.
Yeah, I love that. And it sounds like you've got some good friends too. You are who you put yourself, who you surround yourself with. So it seems like you have like kind of some affinity there for adventure and enjoying this life.
Absolutely. Yeah. You have to have the right people that you can call to do the things you want to do.
Yeah. Could you talk about your invite only expedition series for business leaders?
Yeah. So this came out of, I mentioned earlier, coming back from Between the Peaks and feeling like I just craved the unknown exploration. And I wanted to give other people a taste of what I experienced with that, 4.5 month trip through the Americas, but on a micro scale. And so I had started an adventure media company called Explore Inspired. I was doing a lot of branded content. It was kind of like my Between the Peaks was the film that kind of gave me the bedrock to launch this company and have the connections with PR and with brands, and start to do more like social media content and web content and all that. And so as a piece of this media company, I just found myself wanting to bring people into the unknown. And so whether it was like readers of Explore Inspired or people that I met when I was speaking The first one actually happened because I was speaking at an event down in Costa Rica, and after leaving there, I was thinking about going to Iceland in December, and I posted on the event attendee page just a link, and I was like, "Hey, anybody who's like willing to, go on a crazy adventure with me, I'm not going to tell you like where or what we're going to do, but like apply here." And it was a simple type form to just gauge who people were, their fitness level, their interest, their a few different things, and then I ended up selecting two people that I just told them to book a trip to Reykjavik on certain dates, and then showed up in Iceland and led them on a backcountry camping winter expedition to see the Northern Lights, and super super fun. I did this a few more times, but I wouldn't say I ever turned it into a real business model inside of Explore Inspired because I shied away from the legality of, like, I didn't have insurance to do this, and I didn't have like an official guide or backcountry rescue license or anything. I had my experiences, but I felt confident that I could do this. But of
Yeah.
course, I was not protected from what could have happened if I started charging for it. So I did a few more of those, but we went to Mount Shasta. I led two guys up Mount Shasta in California for their first like 14er climb. And then I took a whole group up Mauna Kea out in Hawaii. And yeah, it was a super fun little series, but I backed away from making it an official business.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. What's one of the scariest experiences you've had, and what's the lesson you took away from that?
Funny enough, the scariest experience I ever had was not in the mountains. It was in the ocean. My friend Grant, who I had met in New Zealand, he was somebody that I got very close to down there when we were studying abroad. He was in graduate school studying marine, fisheries down in Mississippi, and he messaged me one day and showed me a picture of like a little 18-foot 1982 schooner that he had bought, and was like, "Yeah, I'm just gonna get into sailing." I was like, "I'm coming down." And I think it was the next weekend or maybe 2 weeks later, I had booked a ticket down to Mississippi to go take this boat out on its inaugural voyage. And Grant didn't really know how to sail. He had maybe been a couple times. I knew nothing about sailing, and we had the youth confidence and audacity to take this thing out into the Gulf and sail to the Barrier Islands, and it was terrifying. Things started off pretty fun. We lost the jib line, and fortunately, the climber and me was able to get shimmy up the mast and get it back, and then my mountaineering skills came into play as far as knowing rope work and knots and all of that. But I was very out of my element and comfort zone on the water, and we anchored down that evening and woke up the next morning in a hurricane warning. And there was lightning showering down within feet of the boat, like just hitting all around us. And there were probably 8 to 10 foot swells that were smashing into this tiny little boat, and we were getting soaked and taking on water. And the winds were insane, and it was like that was the first time in my life where I was like, "Oh, we're gonna die. Like, we're gonna get hit by a lightning bolt. It's gonna shatter through the mast straight down here. We're gonna get blown up and drown is what's gonna happen." And fortunately, there was a little lull in the storm, and we were able to up anchor and get over to one of the docks on the Barrier Islands that was totally abandoned. There was literally just one little shack on the island. It was like a research station or something, and nobody was there. And so we couldn't get into it, but there was like a little outhouse kind of like closet thing that was open and just full of like the water heater was in there. And then there was like probably, I don't know, 80 bottles of bleach or something, and then just spider webs. And we just like huddled into this thing for the rest of the storm. Um, so yeah, that was probably the most terrifying adventure because I had no business being out there. And so what it taught me was that I needed to double check my excitement and enthusiasm and overconfidence, and really take some of this stuff a little more seriously as I was growing up and starting to learn that there are consequences.
Yeah, fascinating story. Is there an extreme sport that you haven't done but would like to try? You mentioned like wingsuit is off not in the cards anymore. Is there anything else like paragliding or something?
Yeah, it's funny that you brought up paragliding. That's the thing that's top of mind. I'm definitely intrigued by it. I've gone tandem once before and thought it was incredible. I've gone skydiving twice, both times tandem. And every single time that I go, I'm like, I need to be in the air. I need to figure this out. And I just have never prioritized it and dedicated any time to try to get like a skydive cert, and start to like learn the mechanics of flying a chute myself. But it's something that's on my mind. I think that it would be just the same way that I like to climb and snowboard down something. I think it's that unlock of like, if there's no snow, you might as well fly down rather than walk down. And that intrigues me a lot.
Does New Zealand feel kind of like a second home to you, having studied abroad there in a formative part of your life?
Um, I wouldn't say a second home. It will always hold a really special place in my heart, and I can't wait to go back. But I know that going back won't feel like it did. Right? It's going to be a different, like when you find an old pair of shoes that like at one point they were your favorite shoes, and they fit you so well on every run, but 8 years later when you find those shoes and you put them on, you're like, I don't even really like the color of these anymore, and they fit kind of funny. Like it's weird. And I'm sure that would probably be the case, even though I'd learn to love it in a whole new light. Like
Yeah.
if I brought my son or went with my wife, or went with different friends for some different adventure. But I'll always have a special place in my heart for New Zealand for what it did for me at that age. And then the place that feels like a second home is Aspen, Colorado, because that's where when I came up with the Between the Peaks idea, the place we moved that I got, my two buddies to go move out and train in the mountains and live for a year and a half before we went and did that was Aspen. And so that feels like a second home.
Nice. Um, could you talk about your speaking gigs? You're a public speaker as well.
Sure. I mean, the speaking gigs came out of Between the Peaks and just like coming back with a story to share, right? Like that's
Yeah.
the most effective speaking comes from stories and experiences and how you draw that into applicable lessons for others to learn. And so coming back from there, the first speaking thing was like at my high school. I went and spoke in my hometown to kids that were sitting in seats that I had sat in, 10 years prior, and showed them what could be possible with a more unconventional outlook on their future. And also in a way that was like, hey, don't just like be a vagabond and take a gap year and go party. It was like, do the adventure, but have a purpose behind it, right? And the purpose could be just volunteering. The purpose could be that it's a future career that you want to set up, or the purpose could be coming back from that and it being the thing that differentiates you in the next job interview that you have, right? Where like I knew that if Between the Peaks did nothing at any festival and like I never did anything more with the adventure career, I knew that if I was going to go just get a job in marketing somewhere, that nobody could hold a candle to that story. And that's what resonates. That's what stands out. That's what creates like, a imprint in somebody's mind when they're thinking, who do we want here? Do we want the person who has this experience on paper matches up with this one, but they have this incredible experience to
Yeah.
share, to learn from, for relatability with people? Like, it's always about collecting experiences. And so that was the very first thing that I did. And beyond after that, it just started to steamroll with opportunities because I had the mindset and the wherewithal enough to capture the content and get photos and videos of me speaking and say like, oh, I could actually start to get paid for sharing adventure stories and figure out how to motivate people, or how that eventually, like the speaking that I started doing later on was not just sharing the stories of my trips and what I learned from it, but it was sharing just general principles of leading expeditions, and being in these high stakes, rapid, changing, crazy environments, learning like what do you learn from being the leader on a rope team where everybody has different roles and responsibilities and you have to go into avalanche prone terrain with a decision making matrix that you've all agreed upon. If this happens or that happens, it's like you can go and I eventually did go and talk to like a lot of leadership teams at a lot of Fortune 500 companies that I would guide through these adventure kind of immersive learning experiences based on not just me sharing like a slideshow of like what I've done, but based on these lessons that you learn in these extreme environments and how that is applicable to taking to your teams and to the decisions that you make and the attitude you have when you're building towards goals and strategies every single day. So yeah, it was a kind of a natural evolution, and the desire to be on a stage came from being a musician growing up. I always played in bands, and so, very much into punk rock, and was a singer songwriter, and so I was always doing talent shows and loved to be behind the mic on a stage with my guitar. And so the speaking career just ended up being an extension of getting on stage to tell stories and move people in a different way just without my guitar.
Yeah, I imagine too, climbing Denali makes speaking in front of a crowd seem a lot less intimidating.
I'll never not get butterflies to get up in front
Really?
of people, but at the same time, you're right. Yeah, there's a whole different attitude that you take to every single day and every single conversation when you have been in those kinds of life or death situations. It makes a lot of the stuff that a lot of people stress about in and out of the office and on a regular basis seem so arbitrary. And so there's a whole perspective shift to the more, and you don't have to go like risk your life to get that. You just have to challenge yourself to get out of your comfort zone and start to like push your physical and mental limits. And you could be starting here, or you could be starting here. Everybody has a limit they can push. And the more that you can learn about how you push your physical and mental limits, the more that you start to shift that perspective of what doesn't really matter. And that creates momentum because you stop worrying about the minuscule stuff, and you can see the big picture of what needs to shift.
So you've done some really extreme things, some of which, if we're being honest, probably your survival was up to chance. So it's nice that you made the cut. But here you are, a family man, a business leader, and you're a little bit more aware and measured in your decision making, it would seem. But yet, I'm sure you've reached those peaks. You have that amount of adrenaline. Like, how do you decide now, like how to plan your next adventure or put yourself outside of your comfort zone? To people that are balancing a 9 to 5 or something like that, I'm hoping this could help them.
Um, Yeah, for me, I mean, the goalpost will continue to move, right? And so, like that's where I just mentioned, you can start here, you can start here. Like for me, like I've done a lot of insane things, and so when I look at what might be on my objective this year, 2 years ago I ran 56 miles, the rim to rim to rim across the Grand Canyon, and so now I'm like, do I want to run 100 miles? Is that the next challenge, or do I want to climb higher than I've climbed before? And to be honest, the reflection that I came to a couple weeks ago for thinking about like what's my adventure goal this year, it was that I don't necessarily need to do that right now. Right now, I'm reflecting on why, and thinking through what actually is going to push me to grow and learn something new about myself. And so that's where I think everybody needs to think about what is their why behind pushing the limit, pushing the bar, and what will force you to create a new outcome for yourself on the other side. And so for so many years, the adventures were creating new outcomes because either they were opening up doors for a career, and they were, experience notches in my belt that I could speak on stages about, or it was a new film or a new thing that I was creating, or just I had never done it and I wanted to prove to myself that I could get to that height or go to that distance, right? And these days, it's not that I don't want to go further. I will at some point run 100 miles. I will at some point do a bigger mountain, probably. But the thing that I reflected on this year is I actually want to pivot to a more creative challenge, and something, back to the music side of things, that was so foundational and fundamental in my life. Being a musician taught me so much about being a marketer because of the early days of having a band and figuring out, hey, all right, how do we get this out there? I created something. I wrote this song. I want people to hear it. What are the mechanics of figuring out how to get people's attention and get them to a show or get them to download the song? Or how do we like work the charts on the MySpace or Pure Volume pages? Or how do I like change the HTML on the background of the MySpace page? Or what's like a nicely composed cover image that I can design? Or like all of those things were foundational for me becoming a better marketer, as well as learning to be a good storyteller and speaker. When writing lyrics of a song is like, how do you convey a story and emotion in concise copy and imagery Great. Now I became an amazing copywriter because I wrote songs, right? So all of that fed into build the life that I have today. But for a decade, I left music behind in a big way when I was pursuing an adventure and when I was launching these companies in the last 6 years, building this Trainual, the software business. Music had been something that wasn't necessarily a key piece of it all. And so that was my reflection this year, is that like I wanted to change the big goal from not just what's the next mountain or the next run or whatever that I'm going to do to like continue to push the bench post. But this year, what's the creative challenge that forces me to relearn something about myself and create a new outcome? And so this year, my big thing is to release an album. And I've been writing in the background for years, just never really done much with it. And so that's the challenge for me this year. And so there's never a linear path towards discovering yourself, I think. And that's maybe the takeaway for everybody, is like, if you are starting from ground zero, what is, like, is a 5K something that scares you, that feels daunting? Cool. Sign up for that. Show yourself that you can do it. Is just going for a hike something that you've never done before? Try it, right? Or have you always wanted to sew? Have you always wanted to paint? Like what things feel like something you've seen that just draws your interest, that you've always said, oh, I wish I could, or I always wanted to, or I don't think I could even. That's the key one. I don't think I could. Prove that you can. Try it. And so it doesn't always have to be pushing the physical limit. But I will in the future. Again, I'll come back to the pushing of the mileage, I'm sure.
I love that. How did Trainual come about? And what is it like working with your bro?
Well, working with my brother is incredible and is a big reason why I'm even still involved in Trainual. Granted, I love the product, I love the company, I love the team and everything that we are doing. But when we launched it, and I'll get to like where it came about. When we launched it, my intent at that time was I was just going to help get this thing off the ground. Chris and I have always worked so well together. He is 3 years older than me. We were always involved in, the little kid businesses together, the lemonade stands and the car washing and the landscaping. And then he started the video company, and then I, helped build that through high school and college. And it was the period after Between the Peaks where, for that period of time when I was doing my adventure film and speaking and my media company, he was doing a small business consulting firm out in Arizona. And that was the only period of our times where we didn't work together in our lives, right? It was like 6 years, maybe 5 years or something, that we were doing separate things. And Trainual was actually developed inside of his consulting firm as just an app, a beta app that some of his clients were using to help with onboarding and documenting processes. And I think it was like somewhere late 2016, he just started seeing that people outside of his clients were finding this and all of a sudden signing up. And it was like, it sparked for him that there could be something scalable there, whereas like his consulting time wasn't very scalable. And for me, I had just got back from, this was summer 2017 now, I just got back from Denali. I was in Alaska for a month, a little bit burnt out on the expeditions and taking a break. And he kind of mentioned to me that he was thinking about spinning this off as its own company and scaling down the consulting, and wanted my help with some of the copywriting and building a website and doing the brand side of things that we always blended very well on, right? Like he was always the more operationally minded, like systems and processes and organizations and management. And I was always a little bit more of the creative brand marketing, kind of mind, the storytelling side of things and the media. And so it was just a natural collaboration for me to help get this thing going. And I moved out to Arizona for a couple months just with my wife and our dogs. We headed out there and got it launched. And then it was just too much fun working together again. Like we both clicked right back into that spark that we always had, that there was just a magic to our energy and how the skills that we each brought to the table. And 6 years later, that's a big reason, like I said, why I'm still here, because it's just a blast building together. And we have always been, best friends. And the business hasn't changed that in any way. It's just been a medium for us to continue to work closely together and talk more than we ever have. And I spend more time in Arizona with my nephews than I ever would. and he's out here, in Boston more than he would be, right? Because we have this thing that's linking us together, and that's fun.
That's
But so yeah,
amazing.
that's kind of the origin story, and as Trainual just started to scale and gain momentum, it it just looked to be the biggest, when I assessed like what are all the waves that I'm riding right now and what is the most potential. Trainual seemed to have the most potential to really scale and be a life-changing kind of endeavor that we could grow, and I could still do all the adventure stuff on the side, but now I don't have to go ask the brands for money to do it.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. It seems like it's really grown. I mean, in 6 years, I visited the website. It looks like you have a massive team. It's over 80 people. How many
It's
people
actually,
are?
yeah, actually with our like international teams, it's about 110 or 115 now.
Wow. And what do you attribute that to? The brother bond, hiring the right people? Like what's the engine of Trainial? Why is it successful and thriving?
It's a mix of everything. I think that we were very intentional about creating a company that like we wanted to work in, and and so we've been really meticulous about who we hire and like are they the right people, not only from a skill set but from a standpoint of people that we want to work with and collaborate with and create with all the time. And so we've been really intentional about the culture of the team and building that up in a really fun way to like continue to, even at the stage that we're at right now, continue to feel like we still have that startup kind of creative energy. Um, I think that we had product market fit. We knew based on just the period of time that it was a little app inside of Chris's consulting firm and the early success stories and early rabid fans. Like we knew that we had struck a chord with a certain type of buyer in a market that we knew. We're both entrepreneurs. And so we very easily could get into the mind of an entrepreneur and a small business leader that wouldn't have this problem, because we both had that problem. We grew up through like the video company. We had to figure out how do we systemize things so that we could have 5 events going on in 5 cities in the same weekend, and we don't have to necessarily be at all of them, but every single one of them is going to look and feel like our company. It's going to operate the same way, and the camera operators or the sales table people or the production managers are all going to do it the exact same way. How do we make that happen? We had felt that before. When I was on Denali, I actually used Trainual to document it was the first time I ever used the product. I documented like how to keep the blog running and how to do the newsletters and the podcasts and the client work that still had to keep moving. And so that my wife and two contract writers and a friend that I had at the time could like keep things going. And so it was easy to figure out, well, how do we market to this audience? Because this audience was us, specifically Chris. Like I knew how to tell a story to get Chris excited. And so that was the unlock for like the entire go to market and funnel strategy of building the inbound machine that grew Trainual. So it was part our energy, it was part the product hitting the right, being a great product at the right time, understanding our buyer, understanding who we were selling to and how to move them. And I think also, we were in the B2B like HR tech operations SaaS space, but I knew nothing about that. I knew nothing about B2B marketing in a SaaS product to HR ops, right? But that was the strength. It was like coming from the authenticity of adventure storytelling and outdoor branded content and everything that I was doing in that space, and having the background of both of us being very capable video creators from our early stages. We knew how to take a camera and tell a story and create really fun content that would work on social media, and create a brand that felt way different than anybody else out there doing SOPs. And so not knowing was a big part of the success as well.
That's what I love, is taking something from one industry and applying it to another. You have what I call like outsider insights, because you're looking at it from a totally, it's like being an immigrant. You can, if you're like a motivated immigrant in a place, you can totally exploit like opportunity because you're not bound by understanding. You just see opportunity, like we were talking about earlier. It's just necessary, and this is how I can do it. And people are like, how did you come up with this idea? And it's like, because I had the spirit and the drive and the discipline and all that. So yeah, that's amazing. Where would you like to see Trainial go from here?
I mean, we've only scratched the surface of the market, and I think that like for all the success we've had, there's still 10x more ahead of impact that we can make. I think that's the thing that drives this all is like understanding that methodology of being able to have events running in different cities that Chris or I didn't have to be at, or being able to be literally off the grid on a glacier in Alaska, tied to nothing but my friends and everything happening behind the scenes like it should. Like that's the unlock for any business owner and entrepreneur that gets to that point where they don't have to wear the hats and they don't have to work on the stuff that every single day in the grind. And so it's like helping exponentially more people get to that place where the owner can remove themselves from the day-to-day of the business, or the individual contributors, the employees in the business, can figure out how to take off a hat and realize that being replaceable is actually an incredible skill set, because that's how you move up. You
Yep.
stop doing the same thing over and over, figure out how to delegate and take on the next challenge. And I think that element of allowing people to take control over taking their next step in whatever ladder they're climbing is something that we can unlock. And so yeah, Trainual has still a lot of market share to gain, and it'll be fun to do it. We have this principle, POV on a business playbook, and what that is, I think it's differentiated from how a lot of people see business documentation. It's a little more holistic, and it's rooted in having done it ourselves in small business versus the theory. And so I think that there's a lot to be gained in our pursuit of every business having a playbook. Um, so yeah, that's where we're going. We want the, as a marketer, I want the brand to be a household name.
Understandable. Looks like it's very possible. As a marketer, what are some other companies that you admire from a marketing standpoint? Who do you think does it best?
Um, I think that I'll never not look to Patagonia. I think that they're incredible. It's their strategy is not going to work for everybody. They're pretty abrasive in the stance that they take. They're ready and willing to polarize half of the potential viable market, but for the purpose of creating more rabid fans, for the ones that do resonate with them. But I admire the brazenness and the purpose that Patagonia brings. I look to a lot of creators specifically, more so than brands. I do love
Okay.
how Nike markets. There was reading the book Shoe Dog by Phil Knight. There's so many lessons to be learned about the early days of Nike and how they built that, and they're obviously still an incredible brand. Um, Apple, less inspiring these days, but they had their time, I think, earlier on in the Jobs era, where everything they did was incredible. But the creators that I look to, I really love what Ryan Reynolds is doing in the business space these days. His ability to take his wit and his charm and his kind of creative storytelling chops to differentiate the brands that he's involved with and build that engine of building brand equity for something that he has a little bit of ownership stake in, and do that through the Maximum Effort advertising company, and Mountain, the
Right.
CTV brand he acquired, or at least bought into. I don't know the logistics of that deal, but um, he I admire a ton. I look to Gary Vee. I think that he's just always on the forefront and has his finger on the pulse of where the attention graph is. Um, I think that Russell Brunson with ClickFunnels, if I have to look in the SaaS space, is somebody that I really admire. Maybe not everything that he does, but his funnel hacking kind of mindset and the value ladders that he identifies in and teaches inside of like Marketing Secrets and Expert Secrets, those books of his. Love those. So that's a few that are top of mind.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing. A few of those I haven't seen yet, so I'll definitely drill down into those and invite the listeners to do the same. So, where can people keep up with what you're doing? Like your album coming out or your next adventure?
Definitely LinkedIn or Instagram are where I spend most of my time. So just Jonathan Ronzio, my full name, on either of them, and you'll find me. And anywhere else, I'm pretty Googleable. But yeah, jonathanronzio.com is my site. Trainual.com is the company. If you're looking for my music, then it's just my last name, Ronzio, on Spotify or Apple.
Very cool. Anything you want to leave us with? Anything we didn't touch on?
Man, you covered a pretty decent chunk of my life story. You came prepared. So I don't think there's anything else. If anybody wants to go deeper after listening to this on any individual chapter there, I am an open book and would love to chat. So please reach out. But no, thank you, David. This was a super fun recounting of my story. So thank you.
Thank you very much. It was inspiring, and I'm going to push myself, and I hope the listeners and watchers do the same. So good luck with Training and good luck with your next album. Thanks for talking to us today.